Hello, everyone. This is Yoko. In this channel, I'll be sharing information in English that I've gathered since events unfolding in China often don't reach other countries. I gather information from various sources, so I'd appreciate your comments on the video content. English is not my native language, so I'm using an AI speaker to read in English. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe to the channel and show your support. Now, let's delve into the wild world of China. This video will be quite lengthy. I want to talk about the background of various events happening between Myanmar and China. In recent developments, there is information about China receiving 30,000 suspected fraudsters transferred from Myanmar. This is quite noteworthy. In another article, it is reported that resistance forces are emerging throughout Myanmar, signaling the possible end of the military regime. Currently, Myanmar is in a state of internal conflict, and the military regime is under considerable pressure. Additionally, there's a headline stating, China strengthens vigilance against the border situation with Myanmar. In other words, Myanmar is in extreme turmoil internally, and it seems the Chinese Communist Party is intervening in Myanmar's internal affairs. At the same time, a large number of suspected fraudsters are being sent from Myanmar to China. While these stories are all connected, it's challenging to understand the link between China and Myanmar by looking at individual pieces of information. Therefore, this video might be a bit long, but I want to explore what is happening between Myanmar and China, going back in time to understand the internal situation in Myanmar and its relationship with China. The location of this event is in the highlands along the border area between Myanmar and China. It has an area about twice the size of Singapore and a population of around 150,000. It's currently a focal point for various issues arising between Myanmar and China, and to understand what's happening in Myanmar, especially in this central region, we need to delve into historical context. Specifically, we need to explore the history related to Lawi Kong, known as the King of Kokong. Understanding the history of these events will make it easier to comprehend what is happening. Let's go back in time, during a period of uncertainty when it was unclear whether China would be dominated by the Communist Party or the Kuomintang. As the influence of the Chinese Communist Party expanded, some members of the Kuomintang went into hiding in the underground of present-day Myanmar. At that time, it might be more appropriate to refer to it as Burma, but for this video, let's use the term Myanmar. While it is well known that the Kuomintang retreated to Taiwan, some individuals sought refuge in Myanmar. The situation in Myanmar at that time did not seem to be characterized by a single regime governing the entire country. This appears to have been the prevailing situation. In reality, Myanmar had influential clans ruling different regions, each governing its own territory. In this context, the Kuomintang forces that sought refuge in Myanmar were recruited by local clans in the highland region I mentioned earlier. Myanmar had many clans, each in conflict with others and possessing military power. As a result, members of the military were recruited for military training. Among those who underwent this military training was Lawi Kong, later known as the King of Kokong. Lawi Kong's ancestors seem to be from Yunnan province in China, essentially belonging to the Minnan ethnic group. After military training, Lawi Kong rose through the ranks and became an officer in the Kokong army. Subsequently, the Myanmar government granted autonomy to various clans throughout the country. An agreement was reached with local clans as part of an effort to incorporate these clans under the governance of the Myanmar government. During this period, coexistence and mutual prosperity between central and local authorities might have been possible. However, in 1962, Myanmar came under military rule. The military regime didn't want to acknowledge autonomy in various regions and insisted on its own dominance. As a result, the military regime invaded the Kokong region, leading to the collapse of autonomy. At that time, Ho Kase, who was a member of the Kokong army, fled to Yunnan province in China. Since the government forces were more powerful at the time, he crossed the border and escaped to China. Today, if many people come from other countries, a nation might consider closing its borders. However, at that time, movement from Myanmar to China was relatively free. Ho Kase's unit, which had escaped to Yunnan province, collaborated with the Myanmar Communist Party army. Interestingly, the military regime in Myanmar was anti-communist and further anti-China. Chinese people and their homeland were oppressed, and those associated with the Communist Party faced persecution. As a result, those opposing the military regime sought refuge in China, and people escaping from Myanmar joined them in Yunnan province. At that time, the Chinese Communist Party was supporting the Myanmar Communist Party. As a result, the power of the Myanmar Communist Party army gradually strengthened. In 1968, Ho Kosei returned to Myanmar as part of the Communist Party army and reclaimed Kokong. The Communist Party army declared the establishment of the Kokong regime, and Ho Kosei assumed the position of county chief ruling Kokong. This was because Ho Kosei had received military training since childhood and commanded a powerful force, upon which the Myanmar Communist Party army heavily relied. However, the situation changed after some time. While the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, had once supported the Myanmar Communist Party, the Myanmar government and the CCP began to draw closer. It might seem curious that the Communist Party supported another Communist Party. Although there had been a historical rivalry between the Communist Party and non-communist forces, the situation changed due to China's interests. Rather than supporting the Communist Party army that controlled part of Myanmar, China found it more beneficial to improve relations with the entire Myanmar government. As a side note, the United States faces a similar situation. Despite advocating support for countries that share values of freedom and democracy, the U.S. does not officially recognize Taiwan, acknowledging the non-Communist Party ruled China as the legitimate Chinese government. This, too, is driven by expediency, where values such as freedom and democracy often take a back seat to current interests. As a result of these changes, the Myanmar Communist Party became isolated. Although they had received support from China, the Myanmar government and the CCP drew closer. In this situation, the Myanmar Communist Party, traditionally engaged in opium cultivation in the region, became dependent on opium as a source of income. However, as the routes for opium trafficking gradually closed, the Communist Party weakened, and its influence among the people diminished. Ho Kosei left the Communist Party in 1989 and reconciled with the Myanmar government. The area referred to as the Kokong Special Region by the Communist Party was recognized by the Myanmar government as the Kokong Self-Administered Zone, granting substantial autonomy. Ho Kosei took on the role of the regional government's leader, often called the King of Kokong, but his position was not always stable. There were instances where his subordinates collaborated with forces from other regions, leading to rebellions against Ho Kosei. Despite these challenges, Ho Kosei continued to rule the Kokong region for a long time. However, from the perspective of the Myanmar military junta at that time, they were unwilling to acknowledge the existence of what seemed like an independent country within Myanmar. Consequently, they had long sought to control Kokong. In 2009, the Myanmar military infiltrated Kokong and expelled Lawi Kong. During this period, it was revealed that some of Lawi Kong's former subordinates near him had conspired with the government. After Lawi Kong's expulsion, some of his former subordinates took charge of the opium trade. They began overseeing opium transactions on behalf of the Myanmar government. They formed families, engaged in illegal business over generations, and among them was Nan Kin, a member of Lawi Kong's group, who took on roles such as county governor. According to Chinese sources, he was said to have assumed the position of county governor. After taking office, Nankin gained control over Kokong's police authority. As a result, Nankin became deeply involved in various illegal businesses through opium transactions. For instance, while gambling and fraudulent activities are illegal in Myanmar, they accepted bribes without cracking down on these operations. Consequently, operators of illegal businesses collaborated, formed communities to share profits, and engaged in illicit activities. This is where the connection to China becomes apparent. Operations of fraud and gambling through opium transactions primarily targeted individuals in China. Proficient Chinese speakers were forcibly recruited from China for these illicit activities, and this continued over generations. According to reports from Taiwanese media, Chinese security forces were said to have infiltrated organizations involved in these illegal activities. However, despite being a member of this family supporting these illegal businesses, Nankin Shu, who was related to the murders, was said to have killed a Chinese spy while being a member of China's security forces. The motives behind these killings remain unclear, and it's unknown why this information has come to light. Perhaps there are still spies at large, disseminating information. Essentially, even if tens of thousands are extradited to China, the situation is not considered fully resolved. Other families, originally Law Wei-kong's subordinates but who betrayed him to join the government, now oversee opium trading. These families are involved in various activities such as military interests, border security, mining operations, and at the same time, internet scams and online gambling. Furthermore, during Law Wei-kong's leadership, a person named Nan Han held the third-ranking position. This individual supervised part of the border security forces and was allegedly involved in international human trafficking. Specifically for Kokong, there are claims that people were recruited from China to engage in online operations. This person seems to have a son, and recently, without any apparent reason, he uploaded a video in which his son voluntarily confessed to crimes, urging others to report his family's criminal activities to the police. The abrupt appearance of these videos is suspected to be related to the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. In other words, the CCP often apprehends criminals, films them within China, and broadcasts the footage. Of course, individuals appearing in those moments are likely speaking in accordance with CCP directives, and they are not freely expressing themselves. When a son suddenly urges everyone to voluntarily report to the police, despite his family engaging in extensive illegal activities, there is suspicion that he is already under CCP custody. Now, let's touch upon one aspect of the current situation in China. The region known as Kokong is dominated by multiple families engaged in illegal businesses, forming communities that share profits. These illegal activities primarily target Chinese individuals, causing considerable damage. Despite China's economic downturn, people who cannot earn much through regular jobs tend to turn to gambling in hopes of a quick turnaround. However, money rapidly flows out, posing a significant problem for the CCP. Even though the CCP has called on the Myanmar military junta to address these illegal activities, there has been little progress. The reason for this lack of progress is that individuals involved in illegal activities or supporting such activities are connected to the government. Therefore, despite China's requests, substantial progress has not been made. However, a recent significant development involves factions related to Law Wei-kong, as mentioned earlier. Law Wei-kong, betrayed by his own subordinates, attacked by the Myanmar government, and reported to have fled to mountainous areas or within China, passed away in 2022 at the age of 94. However, the influence of Law Wei-kong's forces is still intact. They are launching attacks against the military junta as an anti-government force, potentially causing the current state of internal conflict in Myanmar and weakening the military regime. In this situation, the CCP appears to be supporting the Myanmar military junta. On the other hand, anti-government forces declare not only the overthrow of the regime but also the eradication of illegal activities such as online gambling and fraud. This message is directed towards the Chinese Communist Party, indicating that the military junta, in collaboration with the CCP, is strategically cracking down on individuals engaged in illegal online activities. This goes beyond mere law enforcement, signaling that the interests of the anti-government forces align better with those of the CCP. If these issues are not appropriately addressed, there is a risk of losing Chinese support, and the military junta might become vulnerable to the actions of anti-government forces. Therefore, the military regime sees this as a necessary step. Consequently, the country is internationally isolated, relying entirely on China. There is a possibility of seeking Chinese intervention, and if the military regime were to collapse, China is concerned about who would assume control. Currently, various factions within Myanmar are rallying against the military junta, but if the regime collapses, power struggles may ensue, leading to further fragmentation within Myanmar. Different regions could be governed by different leaders, making it challenging for China to diplomatically navigate the situation. If China were to support the military junta, the expected outcome would be to secure the transportation route from Yunnan province through Myanmar to the Bay of Bengal. That concludes our discussion for now. Until next time.